The Haelor Empire spanned countless star systems, their ships gleamed like iron giants in the void, and their armies were said to crush civilizations beneath their heels. They ruled with absolute certainty. No race had ever dared challenge their might, and for centuries they had expanded unopposed like a tide that could not be stopped. They had conquered entire worlds in swift campaigns, their fleets vast and overwhelming crushed anything in their way. Their enemies either fled or were wiped from existence. But in their hubris, they had overlooked something small, something distant, far beyond the reach of their mighty armada, a race that had just begun to venture into the stars, a race that had already begun to change the course of history in ways no one could have predicted. The humans had no empire to speak of, no grand fleets, no weapons of unimaginable power. But they had something else. They had something the Haelor could not fathom, something the Haelor were blind to. The humans had ingenuity, they had the will to survive, they had the fire of a species that refused to bow down and accept extinction. Their strength lay not in their size or technology, but in their ability to adapt and evolve. They were creatures of perseverance and innovation. Their ships may have been small and outdated compared to the Haelor's mighty warships, but they were far from defenseless. They had learned from every battle, every war, every challenge they had faced. They had developed weapons and tactics that defied logic and expectations. Their scientists had scoured the galaxy for knowledge and had uncovered secrets that made their ships more dangerous than anything the Haelor had ever encountered. But the Haelor did not know this. They had never encountered the humans on a scale that mattered before. They had seen them as little more than a nuisance, something unworthy of serious attention. So when a small human fleet was detected at the edge of Haelor space, the Empire's high command dismissed the threat entirely. They saw the ships as no more than stray vessels, unworthy of even a single cruiser to investigate. The human fleet was tiny, barely a handful of ships, but the Haelor were sure that they could easily crush them if need be. They ordered a single fleet to be dispatched to neutralize the threat. The humans were far from any major trade route, and their fleet was scattered and unorganized. Surely they would fold under the first sign of aggression. They thought there was no reason to waste resources or effort on such an insignificant target. They were confident they would wipe out this human presence with minimal effort. It was a simple task that would require no strategy, no caution. The humans would fall easily. But the Haelor failed to see the most dangerous part of their plan. They failed to account for the human spirit, the thing that would turn their overconfidence into their greatest mistake. And they failed to understand that the humans would never surrender without a fight. The humans had long been underestimated across the galaxy. Their name evoked little fear or respect to the greater powers of the universe. They were seen as primitive at best and insignificant at worst. Their cities were small, their ships rudimentary, their technology was often thought of as inferior when compared to the empires of the stars. But there was one thing the humans had that set them apart from all the other species in the galaxy: a tenacity and a drive that could not be easily explained or understood. Their history was one of survival against impossible odds, of building from nothing and rising time and time again from the ashes of destruction. Where others had fallen, the humans had learned to adapt, to evolve, to find solutions in the most unlikely places. They were scrappers at heart, born of a world where resources were often scarce, where everything had to be fought for from the ground up. Their spacefaring journey had begun only a few centuries ago, but already they had made strides that no one had expected. They had adapted alien technologies, scavenged from the wrecks of countless battleships of far more powerful races, and in doing so they had created a fleet of ships far deadlier than anyone could have imagined, each vessel a testament to human ingenuity forged in the fire of war and desperation. Their engineers were brilliant minds capable of crafting tools of war out of the most unlikely materials. They were not limited by convention, but rather driven by the sheer will to overcome any obstacle. The humans had developed stealth technology capable of evading even the most sophisticated detection systems. They had created weapons that harnessed the energy of stars themselves, turning the raw power of the cosmos into devastating tools of destruction. They had mastered the art of guerrilla warfare, using their small numbers to their advantage, striking with precision and vanishing before the enemy even realized they had been there. They had learned from every defeat, growing stronger with each encounter, taking what worked from other races and adapting it to their own use. They had no grand fleets, no massive armadas, but what they lacked in size, they more than made up for in speed and cunning. Each human ship was a testament to their resilience, and their refusal to back down. Their military leaders were not born of privilege or tradition, but rather forged in the crucible of necessity. These were men and women who had lived through wars, fought on their homeworlds, wars that had pushed them to the brink and beyond, and each one of them carried the knowledge that to give up was not an option. Survival was the only goal. And so they had prepared for this moment. They had spent years creating a fleet small enough to evade detection, yet powerful enough to strike when the time came. They had studied every known enemy and adapted their tactics to counter each threat. They had known that one day a power like the Haelor would come and try to crush them, and so they had waited and prepared. When the Haelor finally turned their eyes toward them, the humans were ready. They knew they would never match the Haelor in sheer firepower, but they didn't need to. They only needed to outsmart them, outblast them, and show the galaxy that no empire, no matter how vast, could ever take humanity lightly. The Haelor Empire was confident their enemy was nothing more than a mere inconvenience. They had dealt with smaller threats before and crushed them effortlessly. The fleet of human ships that appeared at the edge of their territory seemed no different to the Haelor High Command. They were a ragtag collection of outdated vessels, a few scattered ships, not even worth the time of a full assault. The Haelor commanders sneered at the idea of committing their main forces to a skirmish against such an insignificant foe. Instead, they sent a single fleet, led by one of their finest admirals, to deal with the so-called human threat. The admiral was a seasoned veteran, known for his swift and brutal tactics. He had crushed rebellions and destroyed entire colonies with ruthless efficiency in the past, and he was sure that this would be no different. The humans didn't even have the numbers to fight back. His orders were simple: approach with speed, overwhelm the enemy before they could react, and then move on to more important matters. The Haelor fleet consisted of 10 massive warships, each one bristling with weapons of unimaginable power. These ships were designed to devastate entire planets, let alone a handful of human vessels. The flagship was a towering monolith of steel, its engines capable of ripping through the stars themselves, its weapons powerful enough to burn worlds to ash, and the fleet behind it was a force capable of laying waste to anything in its path. The admiral's confidence was unshakable as they cruised through space. His fleet's advance was like the march of a hurricane, unstoppable and inevitable. But as they drew closer to the human fleet, a faint sense of unease began to settle in the distance. The human ships appeared so small against the backdrop of the Haelor armada. They barely seemed worth the trouble, yet there was something strange in the readings. The Haelor sensors were picking up strange energy fluctuations that didn't quite make sense. The human ships were supposed to be obsolete, outdated relics of a bygone age, yet the readings indicated they were far more advanced than anticipated. It was a subtle anomaly, one that most commanders would have brushed off, but the admiral's instincts had been honed through decades of warfare. He couldn't ignore the feeling something was wrong. He ordered his fleet to slow their advance just slightly and adjust their formation. But it was already too late. The moment they entered the outer rim of the asteroid belt near the human fleet's position, the first salvo was fired. The Haelor ships had no time to react as a series of missiles streaked through the void, aimed directly at the lead warship. Before the admiral could issue an order, the missiles slammed into the ship's outer hull, shaking the entire fleet with a deafening explosion. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the Haelor ships. The surprise was palpable as the admiral stared in disbelief at the damage unfolding before him. Human ships that should have been easy targets had turned the tide in a split second. What was happening? Their fire was accurate and swift, unlike anything he had seen from a species so primitive. The admiral's thoughts raced as he ordered evasive maneuvers. He knew the battle was far from over, but the realization was already dawning on him. These humans weren't helpless prey. They were far more dangerous than he had imagined, and they had just struck the first blow. The Haelor fleet reeled from the first wave of the human attack. The damage was far greater than they had anticipated. The lead warship was crippled, its shields shattered and hull breached. With alarms blaring across the ship, the admiral's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched the once confident crew scramble to contain the damage. For the first time in his career, he could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing on him. He had been so sure of the outcome, and yet here he was struggling to regain control of the situation. He barked orders to his officers, trying to reestablish communication with the other ships, but chaos had already taken root. The humans had struck fast, and with lethal precision, using their small, nimble ships to outmaneuver the Haelor's massive warships. Their missiles had found weak points in the Haelor vessels' armor. Their energy weapons tore through exposed systems like a hot knife through butter. The Haelor admiral had never seen anything like it before. In all his years of battle, the humans were relentless and resourceful. They didn't fight like any other species he had encountered. They didn't just rely on brute force, but on cunning and agility. The admiral's voice trembled as he ordered his fleet to regroup and form a defensive perimeter. But as the ships tried to adjust their positions, another salvo of human fire rained down on them, this time from the other side of the asteroid field. The Haelor hadn't even noticed the human ships had moved into position. The humans had lured them into the perfect trap. The asteroid belt had been the perfect cover for the small human fleet. All along, the humans had waited until the Haelor were deep into the field before striking with surgical precision. Now the Haelor fleet was scattered, disoriented, and vulnerable. The human ships darted in and out of the asteroid field, using it to their advantage. They were faster, smaller, and far more maneuverable than the bulky Haelor warships could ever be. They struck again and again, picking off Haelor vessels one by one, their weapons targeting weak points, their tactics unpredictable. The Haelor were caught in a nightmare. They had never prepared for. They had expected an easy victory, but what they were facing now was a battle they had not the slightest hope of winning. They had no way of knowing where the next attack would come from. The Haelor admiral watched in growing desperation as one of his ship's reactors went critical after taking the hit from the human fleet. The warship exploded in a fiery burst, taking out another 2 Haelor vessels that were in the blast radius. The admiral's fists clenched as he realized the full scope of the disaster unfolding before him. The humans weren't just fighting. They were outthinking him, outmaneuvering him, and turning his own arrogance against him. Every strategy he had used against other foes had failed against these human attackers. They weren't just survivors. They were predators in their own right. Their tenacity was matched only by their capacity to learn and adapt. And now it was the Haelor who were being hunted. The human fleet had drawn them into a battle they could never win, a battle that would soon become the downfall of the great Haelor Empire itself. The admiral was no fool. He knew when to retreat. But as he ordered a retreat, he realized that it may already be too late to escape the trap the humans had set. The Haelor fleet, now in full retreat, scrambled to reorganize, but the damage had been done. The human ships, swift and precise, continued their relentless assault, striking at every opportunity. With each passing moment, the Haelor admiral's hope for a clean victory faded. Their once unshakable confidence had been replaced by panic. The asteroid field, once seen as a mere obstacle, had become their greatest enemy. The humans had made it their domain, and they knew it better than the Haelor ever could. The battle was no longer a fight for survival. It was a battle for pride. The Haelor were a people used to dominance, to crushing their enemies without mercy. Now, they were caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse, where every misstep brought them closer to complete annihilation. The Haelor warships, slow and ponderous, fired back in desperation, but the human ships were already gone, disappearing into the rocks and shadows. Every shot the Haelor fired seemed to miss its target by mere inches, as the humans used the terrain to their advantage. They darted in and out of the asteroid field, striking with surgical precision and vanishing before the Haelor could retaliate. The human fleet's tactics were unlike anything the Haelor had ever encountered. The humans had no intention of outgunning the Haelor. Instead, they used their small size and agility to outsmart them, drawing the Haelor into the narrow confines of the asteroid belt, where their massive warships were no longer an advantage. The human ships were like ghosts in the darkness, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before the Haelor had a chance to respond. The Admiral watched in horror as his flagship's shields flickered and failed, one after another. His crew scrambled to repair the damage, but it was too late. A well-placed human missile struck the flagship's aft, sending a shockwave through the entire ship. The Admiral gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a solution, but every plan he came up with was countered before he could put it into motion. It was as if the humans were always one step ahead, anticipating his every move, exploiting every weakness in his strategy. The Haelor were fighters, yes, but they were also creatures of routine. They relied on their overwhelming strength, their sheer size and firepower, to crush opponents. They had never encountered an enemy like the humans, an enemy that could adapt, improvise, and fight with a level of unpredictability that made them nearly impossible to predict. In the chaos, the Haelor fleet had become disorganized, their formation shattered as they attempted to flee the asteroid field. The humans had capitalized on their confusion, relentlessly hounding them from all sides. One by one, the Haelor warships were picked off, their shields failing and their weapons systems crippled. The Admiral, once so confident in his fleet's superiority, now realized that victory was slipping through his fingers. A fresh wave of human fighters emerged from the depths of the asteroid belt, their weapons flashing like stars in the blackness. They descended upon the Haelor ships with a fury, striking hard and fast. In a matter of minutes, another Haelor vessel was lost to the darkness, consumed by fire and debris. The Admiral's face tightened with fear as he realized the magnitude of the mistake they had made. The humans had not only fought back, they had turned the entire battle into a nightmare. And the Haelor were losing. The Haelor Admiral stood frozen, staring out at the battle unfolding before him. His fleet, once an imposing force of invincible warships, was now in disarray. The flagship, once the pride of the Empire, was battered and crippled, its once pristine hull riddled with missile impacts and radiation burns. The Haelor ships that still remained were scattering, some attempting to flee, others spiraling into the asteroid field in an effort to regain any semblance of order. The humans, relentless and unforgiving, pursued them with unmatched precision, striking down every vessel that dared to make a break for freedom. It was then that the Admiral understood the full extent of his mistake. He had underestimated the humans. He had written them off as insignificant, something to be crushed without thought or effort. But now, as his fleet crumbled under their relentless assault, the Haelor Admiral could see the truth. These humans were not like the others they had conquered. They were not weak or primitive. They were cunning, fierce, and far more capable than anyone had given them credit for. The Admiral's mind raced. He had assumed that a species with such small numbers and primitive technology would be no match for the power of the Haelor Empire. Yet, here they were, outmaneuvering him at every turn. Their ships, though not as large or heavily armed as his own, were far more agile. They had turned the battlefield into a place where size and firepower no longer mattered. The asteroid field had been their weapon, and the humans had used it to perfection. Every move the Haelor made was met with a swift counterattack, and their every weakness was ruthlessly exploited. As the battle raged on, the Admiral's thoughts turned darker. He could feel his grip on the situation slipping away, his mind torn between the instinct to retreat and the pride that told him to fight on. But in that moment, he knew that the decision had already been made for him. The humans had forced his hand. They had turned the tide of this battle, and perhaps the war, by showing him the true power of their species. For the first time in his career, the Admiral questioned the superiority of the Haelor Empire. Their vast fleets, their advanced technologies, and their invincible reputation had all meant nothing against the ingenuity and resilience of the humans. The Haelor had always believed that they could crush any enemy with overwhelming force. But here, in the dark heart of the asteroid field, it was clear that brute strength alone would not win the day. The Haelor's greatest weapon, their arrogance, had been their undoing. In the depths of the asteroid field, another Haelor ship fell silent, its lights flickering out as the humans closed in. The admiral felt a pang of loss, but it was quickly replaced by a cold realization. They were losing, and fast. The humans were no longer just defending themselves. They were hunting the Haelor, exploiting every mistake, and showing no mercy. The once proud empire, which had crushed hundreds of civilizations, was now on the brink of destruction. The Haelor admiral clenched his fists in frustration. The humans had shown him a new kind of warfare, one that was built not on overwhelming force, but on intelligence, adaptability, and the unyielding will to survive. They had turned the tables, and now it was the Haelor who were at the mercy of their enemy. In that moment, the admiral knew that his fleet would not survive this battle. And as the humans continued their relentless assault, he realized that this would be the Haelor Empire's greatest defeat, a defeat at the hands of a species they had once believed unworthy of their attention. The Haelor admiral could barely process what was happening as his fleet continued to unravel. His ships were scattered, decimated, and the battlefield had turned into a killing field. Every attempt to regroup was met with another precise strike from the humans, whose agility and determination were more than enough to overwhelm the Haelor's superior firepower. The humans had shifted from a defensive posture to an offensive one, and the Haelor were finding it impossible to keep up. The flagship, once the pride of the Empire, had taken significant damage. The powerful energy cannon, which was supposed to be the ultimate weapon of destruction, was now useless. A direct hit from a human missile had knocked out the targeting system, leaving it blind and vulnerable. The admiral could feel the pulse of panic rising within him. His once great fleet was breaking apart, and there was no hope of stopping the humans now. But in that moment, desperation fueled a new plan. The admiral made a fateful decision. He would use the last of his fleet's strength to make one final push. He knew it was a gamble, an attack that could either break the human resolve or result in the complete annihilation of his fleet. But he had no choice. He had already lost too many ships, too much power. The only thing left to do was fight with everything he had. With a shout, the admiral ordered his remaining warships to focus all firepower on the human flagship, a smaller but heavily armed vessel that had been at the heart of the human assault. If they could destroy that ship, perhaps the humans would falter, giving the Haelor a chance to regroup. The fleet's remaining guns fired in unison, a torrent of energy beams and missiles that arsed through the void toward the human target. The human flagship, however, was not what it seemed. It was designed to lure the Haelor into a false sense of security, drawing their fire while the real threat lay elsewhere. The moment the Haelor opened fire, a secondary fleet of human ships emerged from the shadows of the asteroid field, smaller, faster, and more agile than the Haelor had ever anticipated. They had been waiting, hidden just beyond the range of detection, their weapons powered up and ready to strike. As the Haelor fired their salvo, the humans executed their final maneuver. The smaller ships dashed forward, using their superior speed and maneuverability to surround the Haelor flagship and deliver a series of devastating blows. The Haelor flagship, already crippled, couldn't defend itself against the onslaught. Within moments, its massive hull cracked open, sparks and flames pouring from the ship's shattered core. The once imposing vessel began to break apart, its weapon systems failing one by one. The admiral's eyes widened in shock as he watched his flagship die. He had seen battles, had seen entire fleets fall before, but this was different. The Haelor had never faced an enemy like this, a force that could adapt so quickly, so ruthlessly. The humans were not simply fighting for survival. They were hunting them down, using every ounce of their ingenuity and determination to tear apart the Haelor fleet piece by piece. With the flagship destroyed, the morale of the Haelor fleet shattered. The remaining ships attempted to flee, but they were too disorganized, too broken. One by one, the humans closed in, dismantling the Haelor fleet with surgical precision. The humans had proven their strength, not through brute force, but through strategy, skill, and a never-ending drive to fight for their survival. The Haelor admiral, watching the destruction of his fleet, realized something he could never have anticipated. This was not just a defeat. This was a humiliation. His empire, once proud and invincible, had been undone by the most unlikely of foes. The Haelor Empire would never again underestimate the humans, for they had witnessed the true power of humanity. The power to outthink, outmaneuver, and never surrender. The dust of battle settled, and silence washed over the field of wreckage. Where once there had been the proud Haelor fleet, massive warships, symbols of their empire's might, there was now only debris and the remnants of a shattered force. The human ships hovered in the void, their hulls scared but intact, their crews standing resolute in the face of a victory that had defied every expectation. The Haelor admiral, the last surviving commander of the fleet, watched helplessly as his remaining ships, few though they were, tried to limp away from the battlefield. But they were too slow, too disorganized, and the humans were relentless. The final moments of the Haelor retreat were nothing more than a desperate flight through the debris, a futile effort to escape a punishment they knew they had earned. With the Haelor fleet in full collapse, the humans moved in for the kill. One by one, the surviving Haelor ships were surrounded and neutralized. The human forces, disciplined and calculated, moved as one, ensuring that no ship escaped the retribution that had been long overdue. The humans did not offer mercy. There would be no surrender, no negotiation. Only the quiet, methodical dismantling of an empire that had overestimated its own power. Back aboard the lead human flagship, Captain Elena Hart surveyed the tactical display in front of her, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She was a commander, yes, but she knew what this victory represented. This wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about sending a message. The Haelor Empire, with all its might and arrogance, had been brought to its knees by the most unlikely of opponents. The humans had defied the odds, had shown the galaxy that they would never be crushed, never be silenced. "Report," she said, her voice calm, though there was a fierce pride behind it. "Admiral, we have neutralized all remaining hostile ships. The Haelor fleet is no longer a threat," her communications officer replied, his voice steady. The room fell silent for a moment as the magnitude of the victory sank in. The humans had taken down an empire that had spent centuries expanding and conquering. The Haelor, who had once believed they were unstoppable, were now little more than a cautionary tale, their arrogance their undoing. Hart stood from her seat and paced slowly in front of the crew, her eyes burning with the fire of victory and the knowledge that this battle was just the beginning. They had shown the galaxy that humanity could hold its own, that they were not to be underestimated or discarded as irrelevant. In the grand scheme of the universe, the humans had made their mark, and it would be remembered for generations to come. "This is our moment," Hart said, her voice rising with conviction. "This victory will echo across the stars. It's not just about defeating the Haelor. It's about showing every empire, every species, that we will not be ruled. We are not the weak prey they thought we were. This is the beginning of a new chapter for humanity." Her words spread through the ship like wildfire, and her crew stood taller in response. They had proven themselves. They had faced an enemy far more powerful than any they had ever encountered, and they had won. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they would never again be seen as weak, as insignificant, or as anything less than a force to be reckoned with. As the last of the Haelor ships fell silent, Captain Hart stood before the stars, a new reality dawning for the humans. The galaxy would never forget the day the Haelor Empire made its fatal mistake in underestimating humanity, and from that moment forward, humanity's place in the universe was forever changed.